The member says plateaued. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Standing items, start recording. We did that. Very nice. Let me share my screen and we can talk through some of the RFCs. All right. So first off, outstanding project level RFCs. Looks like we've got just one. Ryan, did you want to speak to this at all right now?
Yeah, I talked about this last week. I really think that we could benefit from having a self-hosted blog. I threw together something really simple and straightforward using Hugo yesterday. It's like the vast majority of it is like taking a theme off of an existing kind of like blog website and styling it and skinning it a little bit to look more like our website. And then I also added some of the like social media sharing functionality that the existing Medium blog had, which is like some links that let you share stuff on Twitter and Facebook and so on and so forth. So yeah, relatively straightforward for us to achieve this. I think the outcome is a little bit better for folks wanting to post stuff on the blog. Pretty straightforward mechanism to get a blog post up is just open a PR and we can get that merged and deployed.
Cool. All right. What stage are you at with this RFC, Ryan? Are you looking for like general feedback, approvals?
Yeah, I mean, general feedback would be great. It's complete, it's ready to go. So the folks I'd like to hear from are obviously Emily and then the maintainers we have on the existing content team, which is Forrest and Kasha, I believe.
I approved it after seeing that you added the share functionality, because to me that was the big, my big concern. So I think it was great.
Cool.
Do you actually have like, you said that you basically spiked this out to get the, do you have that just chilling out in a repo somewhere that you'd be willing to donate so that we don't have to start from?
Yeah, I have it on my local workstation. So
Sick.
assuming this gets approved, I would just like create a repo and push to that.
Sounds good. I think this looks great for like the first iteration. I think I'd love to put this in front of someone who's more design minded than myself. But yeah, like just if we wanted to make the switch right away, sure, I'm fine. Kashyap, do you have any feedback or any pushback to this being part of the content team?
Nope. This is awesome. I have some ideas to make it better, but create some issues after it's pulled in.
I have a quick question. Do we risk like losing like visibility for people finding the blogs if they're not on Medium? Like, are we going to lose out on those people who might like stumble across our blogs if they're just looking through the website?
I don't really think so. I mean, on the existing blogs that we have, Medium has like a tagging feature. So I mean, I have seen that some random people like learn about Buildpacks because of that. I always tag the posts like Buildpack, Docker file, CNV, stuff like that. But it hasn't been like that many users that I would be worried about it or anything.
I think we should focus on distribution and discoverability as like a separate mechanism from the like blog site itself. I think there definitely are like mailing lists we should try to get certain posts on, and like maybe something like Hacker News or integration with a like RSS feed reader, that kind of thing. But I think those things are kind of separate.
Also, search engine optimization might be something we should think about.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, go for it.
No, the only other thing that I might mention is it might be good for us to maybe like more significant blog posts we could continue to put on Medium as well if we really are concerned about losing searchability in that sense. So like roadmaps we could put in multiple places, that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know how concerned I am about that.
All right, cool. For time, I'm gonna move us along, but quickly, are there any action items that we need out of this? Sounds like maybe approvals and then get this in a repo.
One more quick question. The existing blogs that we have on Medium, are we doing anything about that, or what should we do?
So in the repo, I've actually gone through, there are only 3 blog posts. I've gone through and like converted them to work in this new format. So they've all just been like converted to a markdown format and placed in the repo. So the new site will automatically have all 3 of the blog posts that already exist. I don't know if your question is talking about like continuing our Medium account for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, like existing links to blog posts and stuff like that. I'm wondering if we could just keep the 3 existing posts up and maybe just figure out how to put a message on there or something. A new blog lives here or something like that.
Can you post that as a comment on the issue?
Yep, doing that right now.
Cool. All right. So that was the only project level RFC we had. So then if we go over to language specific RFCs, that's this set here. So I guess starting from the bottom here, are there any updates on the PHP restructure RFC? Okay. Is there anything that you need, Arjun, to get this moving, or is it okay to just hang out for now?
It's okay for now. I mean, I'd probably like ping Dan Mikusa, who had some opinions there. If he has any blockers for merging that one, I'll ask him.
Great. Okay. The Go generate one, I popped something about this later on the agenda, so we can skip over it for now. And then lastly, this Node.js RFC.
I can talk about that. Can I share my screen? Okay, is my screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, this one. So this is an RFC like in the Node.js family, and this makes a proposal for Buildpacks to support running npm scripts or commands like before or after installing modules. The reason this was written because we have had community users come to us and request that currently like the Paketo build packs when dealing with node package managers like npm and yarn, all they just do is install the dependent modules. But we have had users say that they want to run like additional commands, and a lot of these come from people who use these front-end web application frameworks like Angular, React, Vue.js, and there's another one, Augur.js, that kind of frameworks. And if you look at the typical workflow with these frameworks, they kind of have they have their own tool where they generate like a package JSON, which looks something like this. And in these, if you look at here, they would have something like either a build or like a custom script. And what this does is generally this one generates like the static assets to like serve their web pages, as in like they generate the actual HTML, the JS, the JavaScript, the CSS, which is then like someone can use like an Nginx or a static file or an HTTPD build pack to serve them. And right now, the way that we've been asking them to do is like, oh, we don't really support running your build command, so why don't you just go and pop in the copy paste the same command into your pre-install or post-install hook, which are like hooks that npm kind of supports, and anyone yarn like supports out of the box. So that's what we've been asking them to do. But it's kind of like a little bit weird for them to like for us to like ask them to like change their app source code just because they want to run it on Paketo build packs. And so for that, like that's why like the proposed implementation, what it does is that we're saying like we're having these two sets of build time environment variables where they can provide like a comma separated value of those life cycle events. They can say like BP npm pre-install equal to build, comma whatever they want, and then in the pre-install phase we would be running this. And similarly for post-install, we also proposed like similar build time variables for yarn. The only other thing to say here is that the order of execution would be that the they can mention their pre-install and post-install in package JSON as well as in using build time environment variables, and this will be in addition to the ones in package JSON and will not like override the ones there. So a very sample or order of execution is given here. So do check that out. So I've left a couple of alternatives and like open questions here to like bring up some discussions. I'm not very familiar with all these web framework workflows, but with little research that I did, a lot of these cases seem to be where they're using the post install event where they first do the npm install is being run by the build pack and they get all the modules that they want, and then they want to like use one of them to like generate these assets. So I didn't really see a lot of, except for like a few example cases, a lot of places where pre-install is used. So just want to see if someone knows how much of use that pre-install would do. Also like the opinionated the implementation section about says like we should use different variables for npm and yarn. Is that really required? So that's another point we can talk. Also like in the implementation, uh, should this functionality be moved away from the npm or yarn install build pack and moved into like separate build pack of its own? Yeah, that's all. Any questions?
I guess I had one question,
Mhm.
which is instead of having sort of specific concepts for pre and post install, have you thought about just allowing the user to configure the arguments passed to npm in their entirety? I feel like it might allow more flexibility because although this addresses one common use case, there's always going to be some
I think the build
extra edge case, right?
Yeah, the build pack kind of takes a few complicated decisions because it not just runs npm install. It's a little bit simplistic to say that because like there's like a little bit of other commands like npm ci, npm rebuild based on the contents of the app source code. So that's why like we're not like trying to give too much power to the user, at least in like setting good practices. But yeah, if there's a use case with complicated use case where user can provide and they want to provide commands, yeah, that's like a thing we can look into.
I'm not as familiar with all the workflows when we want to do with npm. I'm just sort of making the analogy to the Java build packs, where for our Maven and Gradle build packs, like we have a default set of arguments we'd pass to Maven or Gradle, but you can override that exact set, sort of trusting users that like if you say you know what you want to do, like we'll let you do whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, I think the one difference here is that like these commands would be like run after like the main build pack commands and not like exactly as an argument. So from what I hear from the what you talked about Java, that's could be the difference.
I feel like this is just to get that extra behavior, you're then having to say like, oh, you have to go like basically put in the right command to have to reproduce what the build pack was already doing. So like today, users still want that like npm install with like all the correct flags in order to get like caching and all of that kind of stuff, offline support. But then in addition to that, they want to run another command. And so like, if you're in that situation of like, oh, I just also want to run this other command, but I like what the build pack does currently, you then have to like recreate that implementation of what the build pack does currently. And also you lose like if that command changes to support a newer version of npm or something along those lines, you like lose the build pack support for it. Personally, I think this makes a lot of sense to go as like a separate like npm run build pack.
The one problem with an npm run build pack would be like we would kind of have to have like two separate ones, because they'll at least two separate, because they run at like separate points. They would probably have like an npm pre-install and npm post-install, and then we would probably also have to have a yarn pre-install and a yarn post-install. So that'd be like 4 other build packs. There's a little bit of proliferation there, but other than that, it seems very sensible.
It's worth investigating further, like that the pre-install case may not be one that's like makes a lot of sense for folks to have. Like it would be one that's already serviced by the existing npm install and yarn install build packs, and that you can, if you truly wanted something to work as pre-install, like there are already hooks for those particular things. My understanding is that like the run thing is like entirely after the installation process is complete and you have like a node modules directory with all your modules in it, then you want to run some other kind of secondary build process. I think that's where like the run build pack makes a lot of sense. I do get that it would have to be 2 different ones to support yarn and npm.
Cool.
All right. Thanks for bringing that forward, Arjun. So do you feel like you have a path forward on what you want to do next with the RFC?
Yeah, I've pinged a couple of people, who requested these kind of features. So I'm kind of hoping to hear back from them, those people who really work with Node in real world cases. So to get a little bit more feedback, so please comment and then we can take it forward.
Great. Sounds good. All right. I will share my screen for the agenda again. Okay. So we talked about the language specific RFCs. Now on to, should we prevent force pushing to default branches in the Paketo org?
Yeah, so this is a protection that you can enable organization-wide in GitHub. The client managed organization does this, for example. Any default branch in any repository cannot be force pushed into. You can also do it at the repository level. I'm curious how people would feel about doing it at the org level, if that'd be valuable or just unnecessary.
So all the repos we have today, the default branches have a protection rule that says that like stuff has to come in via pull request. So like you can't technically push like at all to the default branch.
Got it. Yeah, we I think one of the repos core devs uses, I think it's probably the stacks one, doesn't have that type of thing. So it sounds like it might just be something that affects a small set of repos then.
I do notice though that at least for I'm looking at the PHP language family repo, for example, and the branch protection settings don't include or don't have the allow force pushes. Or sorry, the restrict who can push to matching branches checked. I'm not sure if we want that as well, but yeah, most of them already have those branch protections.
Is there a particular reason why like don't push to main protections shouldn't be org level? Because it sounds like many Paketo repos have that, but some seem not to. Would that be problematic for the stacks workflows, Mark, if the don't push to main protection was org level?
Don't push to main or don't force push to main?
I guess don't push to main, because that's the protection that many of the build pack repos have.
Yeah, we generally push to main as our workflow in that repo.
Cool. Okay, so in that case, it's sounding like preventing force pushing to default branches would be helpful for like the stacks repos and probably wouldn't impact the build packs repos given the other protections that are set there. So then I think if that's helpful for you all, sounds like there's no objections.
Are there any repositories that exist currently that might do this? Like, would this affect like the RFC's repository or anything like that?
Not that I know of, but I'm not super familiar with.
I'm checking now. I think I put branch protection rules. Yeah, I did. So RFCs requires a PR.
Cool.
The only one I haven't heard, the only person I haven't heard from is Emily. I don't know if this impacts any of the Java workflows.
I'm pretty sure that you already can't force push to main based on the protections we have, but I can double check it all.
Yeah, so it sounds like for the repositories that do already have branch protection rules, this would be like a no-op anyway. So I don't see an objection.
Cool, sounds good. I don't have permission to do this, so should I open an RFC, or is this something someone can do outside of that?
I can do it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Any other questions on that? Sounds like we got to a resolution. Cool. Okay. So next up, right. So this is an RFC that I wrote a little bit ago, proposing a Go generate build pack with the sort of pie in the sky hope that it could do something clever in detection to figure out what tools you need to run your Go generate directives. This RFC opened a lot of technical cans of worms that I spent a bunch of time just kind of like thinking about and trying to figure out something to do. And then in a conversation with Forrest, he proposed, and I kind of agreed, that it might be interesting to just sandbox this Go generate build pack in the Paketo community org with a certain like intentionally kind of narrower feature set. So don't do anything clever in detection, just detect on an environment variable. So that users can experiment with whether this is helpful for their use cases, and maybe we can get more information about what we would or would not need to implement to make this a useful build pack for a lot of people. So that is what I've proposed on this RFC, and I was hoping to get some feedback on that proposal right now. What concerns people would have about this, and then what the next steps would be.
How popular is, how popular do we foresee this use case being? Like, if we were to sandbox it, like, do you foresee us getting enough feedback to like warrant promoting it? Or I guess to even just move forward with this?
I guess my perspective on it was, firstly, maybe betting on Paketo like gaining users over the next, N months in a helpful direction. And then also like us intentionally using this as a way of soliciting feedback from the Go community specifically. Because personally, I don't have enough context to reason about which use cases matter and like who would or wouldn't be enabled by the Go generate build pack being built a certain way. Yeah, does that answer your question?
I think so.
Like, I guess right now we have one data point for like the contributors who wrote their own Go generate build pack just to unblock themselves, which that implementation is linked on this RFC. And their implementation is actually even more simple than the proposed one. It has like basically 0 configuration options. So I'm hoping to get more than one data point so that we can decide where to go with this next.
I think I miss like why we would start it in Paketo community rather than in Paketo if we know that this is a feature that we need, right? Like we could still, even if it's in Paketo, if we know we're going to support it in the long term, still get feedback from it would be easier to include in the language family build pack. Like, it doesn't mean it's done, but I think because there's a reasonable amount of confidence that it is something we want to support in the long run.
That's a fair point. My initial thought was just like to somehow indicate that it's experimental, meaning like we could have different versions of it that do different things and actively solicit feedback. But I guess that kind of depends on what kind of support guarantees or like implications we're trying to make to users.
I would also don't know how guaranteed this is as a use case that we are going to 100% support going forward. We may come to find out that like everyone who uses the Go generate build pack needs it in some bespoke fashion, and it is just either impossible or impractical for us to support a level of configuration that allows X number of use cases. So maybe we go with a different solution entirely. I don't know what that kind of solution would be, but I don't know that it's necessarily like this is 100% what we have decided that the solution is going to be as well. I might be speaking too much out of my head on that as well.
I would kind of agree with you, Forrest, on the rationale. Like, for example, we might discover that this build pack is useless to people who don't maintain their own stack. In which case, then we maybe decide that it doesn't need to be inside of the complete Go order group.
Sorry, I haven't read through this whole proposal yet, but why does maintaining your own stack play into this?
So I guess the short answer here is that Go generate basically is a thing that will run arbitrary commands for you, which usually looks like using a tool that's on the path or is assumed to be on the path to do something, usually generate code, but not necessarily. And so in the
question
one
about how it gets on the
right.
path.
Exactly. Yeah. So like if you just sort of can do arbitrary things with Go generate, then how would the build pack install the appropriate things? And right now there's not really a good answer to that. So it may be that people have to sort of get it onto the build image somehow in order to utilize this build pack well.
That makes sense. I feel like that could still be done by like a different build pack rather than on the stack. I've seen a lot of use cases where people first go install something before Go generating, right? It's pretty common. It's not every single use case, but I wonder if we provided support for some of that because it would all sort of tie in together, that could be helpful.
Yeah, and I think by that same token as well, it may be just that like the user experience is not maybe as tight as we want it. Like I think one of the things that was pointed out was like, let's say that somebody's using like we couldn't make the build pack require like an OS level dependency if the OS level dependency isn't the exact, or like the command isn't the exact name of the OS level dependency. So like it's hard to build in interdependency with that build pack that isn't just like you get to go install and it's like I don't have this thing on the stack, right? Which like, you know, isn't the end of the world, you know, especially if something like a stack pack does exist where you could like ask for, I don't know, GraphViz or something like that. But I think that the user experience suffers for the build pack because there's no way to build in sort of that nice detection logic. But that could just be something that, you know, is unfortunate, but it's still more convenient than having to have a user come up with some other means of doing something or have them generate something locally or whatever it may be.
I guess maybe it's less about this build pack where I feel like now that I've heard some of the concerns about installing the tools, it's experimental enough that might make sense in community, right? But I guess when we talk about like some of these decisions, I sort of have a meta question, when we say we don't want something in Paketo because of support, I'm sort of interested concretely what that means to us. Like, what is the practical thing that we'd be afraid we wouldn't be able to do if it was in Paketo? Like, do we not feel like we can remove a build pack from a language family if we decide not to have it anymore, or make breaking changes to the interface, stuff like that?
I think
So there's like a downside that you have to discover things that are in community that aren't shipped, right?
I think part of the idea, I don't know if this is explicitly laid out, and if it's not, it should be. Part of the idea is if it's part of a language family inside the official Paketo organization, that it goes onto the builder inside the language family in some way, and or into the meta build pack even. And that, I think, has the potential to be hairy if it's not quite right, because then you're sort of having to insert it into these sort of order groupings, and it's an experimental build pack that's on in this official artifact that then goes into the official builder that does that sort of set of things. So I think I understand your concern about it discoverability, but I think maybe it comes down to whether or not we want it to be in the official sort of set of artifacts that we're releasing as part of like the Go family.
It makes a lot of sense to me when it's like a required build pack or one that sort of opts in by default. I feel like things that opt out, unless someone actively opts into it, sort of have a lower risk. So you can sort of document that the build pack is, in early days, like we're shipping it, feel free to use it, but I'm not trying to push it for this one. I'm just,
I guess
wondering if we should be a little bit less risk averse when it comes to making things accessible to people if we don't have practical concerns about types of changes we wouldn't be willing to make.
So
I think just if I real quick. So because one of the things that's so kind of up in the air right now is what kind of detection criteria makes sense for this build pack and whether it should be like on by default or off by default. It might be a weird situation to sort of, if you throw it in the language family and then we're like, oh, what if we try this different detection logic? And now something that defaulted to false now opts in a lot more users' use cases, and all of a sudden they're running what can be a pretty expensive build time operation, go generate, and maybe doing stuff that they didn't want to have happen, sort of with a release. So I guess like I would be hesitant about including it in language family right now if we're actively trying to change or experiment with when it will include it itself.
I'll put a bow on this because I feel like I'm pretty convinced for this particular build pack. But I wonder if, like, in the future, when we have similar conversations, if it makes sense, if we have something experimental, say that we can start by making it explicitly opt-in, so it's safer. And then we could be a little bit more open to shipping risky things. Also with the idea that, if we're making people opt in, we can get feedback that way. And then eventually we can make it opt itself in later, kind of workflow.
I'd like to echo that. This is something I'd love to see a like general RFC about how to handle experimental build pack additions under like some sort of like flagging kind of like environment variable, something along those lines.
Along that line, I'd be interested to see if this could be something that we could even maybe extend into the higher level C&B idea with experimental tagging or something like that. But I'm going to shelve that idea.
Cool. Okay, so do we need any action coming out of this? I guess it's really the question is like, what should happen with the Go generate build pack? I can either ask to adopt the existing implementation into Paketo community or chef up an alternate implementation that does similar stuff. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, I will do that then. All right, And lastly, we have permissions in the org and GCP project.
Yeah, without calling out specific instances, I think the permissions in the org and the Paketo GCP project definitely do not reflect the governance structure of Paketo. And perhaps it might be worthwhile to make it reflect that a little more, without going into specifics of who has what permissions. Might be worthwhile. Wondering what everyone else thought.
Yeah, I think I wondered the same. Digging through the permissions recently also to set up something. Kind of seemed like some were a little too elevated, or like there wasn't enough hierarchy there, maybe.
I think permission was granted based on, if you asked early enough, you got a little more permission than you otherwise would have. So might be worth rethinking some of the permissions we have. I don't know what the process for doing that is. Potentially an RFC. Not exactly sure what the content of that would look like, or if someone wants to just change the ones that are, obviously wrong. That's an option too.
I just want to ask for clarity. Like, you don't have to name anything specifically, but like the permission types we're talking about. We're talking about instances where users have administrator access to the Paketo Buildpacks org, and then also to the GCP, the Paketo Buildpacks GCP account.
Right.
I know of instances in the Paketo Buildpacks GCP account where people have administrator access. What I would like to see in an RFC possibly would be an explanation of like what the specific teams need in terms of permissions that are at a reduced permissions level. That way we can start to articulate like this team needs this permission. And from there, we also have like an ability for you to come back and say, we want, further permissions of a specific thing granted to us. And we can do that in like kind of a recorded manner.
So I was thinking about that, and the only thing about that is like, do we then want, so let's say I create some sort of RFC saying that like everyone on, the core deps team or the core or the Go, sub team needs permission to, X resource in GCP. Do we want to like constantly be adding every member of those teams to GCP as like with some amount of access? Or do we want to keep like individuals for the most part out of the project and have some, small set of owners that grant the 1 or 2 credentials like service account tokens that people need every once in a while? Right, because an RFC like that sounds like you'd have to put everyone in the project into some sort of grouping in the GCP project, or at least every maintainer somewhere. Unless that team literally needs nothing in GCP, although I doubt that's the case for any team because everyone's pushing images somewhere.
In my mind, the natural way to do this would be to create roles in like IAM and GCP that sort of mirror the project structure. So maintainers, and we could have different ones for different groups if we really felt like maintainers in different groups needed different permissions, and then it should be fairly easy to maintain. So if someone like is voted into a new role in the project, we can just go add them to the matching group. But I guess the big question is, what permissions does each role need right now?
Yeah, I honestly can't answer that for every role. I could probably answer that well for the sub-team I'm on, but I definitely don't know that I'm qualified to answer that for every other sub-team.
I think currently, like, the only thing that any of the build packs themselves use GCP for is pushing images. But truthfully, that's moving away. We're moving away from GCP to Docker Hub anyway. So like in the long run, there will be basically nothing that any of the build packs really rely on. And it's like, even in that case, users themselves aren't directly interacting with the image pushing. It's like a separate service account that is created that's just shared across all the teams. So like there basically is, on the build pack development side, almost nothing that we use GCP for.
So I was going to suspect, I feel like I never interact. I can ship a lot of Paketo Buildpacks. I never interact with the Paketo GCP, other than my repos are configured to have a key to push, right? So maybe to begin with, all you need is admins can create service accounts.
I'd be happy to do this. I just need to understand for the core deps team, like what specifically are the permissions that you'd want. And I'd be happy to go in and like, you know, de-escalate the privileges for folks and give you a service account key that allows you the privileges that you need. I just don't know what they are.
Got it. Yeah, so I can tell you all that specifically. Do you think it's still worth an RFC then, or since it's, you know, just us, we can?
If it's just your team, which I have an inkling that it is, then why don't you just like message me with the details of what you need? We can get that sorted out.
Cool. It's also possible, I mean, thinking about it, like whoever's maintaining like the Paketo website, which is like has records within the Paketo GCP project, like DNS records there. Like theoretically, someone on that team should need some access to something, but I can't tell you what.
I think we'll just keep Emily and myself as like owners again on the GCP project. And if folks need changes made to those types of things, we'd be happy to help you out for like
Sure.
that specific stuff.
So I'll message you on Slack to talk about the details.
All right, great. So that's all the agenda items that we have. Are there any late breaking items for the remaining time? Sounds like a no. In which case, this has been the working group meeting. See people next week.